Good evening. Thank you for your presence, all your good cheer, the opportunity to say hello to everyone in the room. We have a couple of people en route parking. They're just about 2 or 3 minutes from actually coming into our gathering. So I want to take this time to ask you if you have a cell phone handy, please take your cell phone out and enter this number. You're going to make a text to a number. So do you have your cell phone handy? Rebecca Smandrowski has her cell phone handy. She always has her cell phone handy. Oh, Shirley Brandman, cell phone ready. Where are all these cell phone ready people? Okay, cell phone in hand. This is the number you are going to text. 240-557-2422. I'll say it again. 240-557-2422. This is a special virtual text number that we have set up so you can share your memory of Pat. So as we move through this evening, if you remember a time when you were together, if there's something you would like to say about her, you can text this number and say, I remember the time when we, and fill in the blank. At the end of this program, we will display your text on screen as we close out our gathering in memory of Patricia O'Neill. You have 1 minute to take your seat. Eli Ehrlich, who is our piano accompanist, will start up the music so that you can find your seat, and we will start our program in about 2 minutes. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. Obviously, you have connected, had some good food, had some drink, and at this moment, we are here to celebrate a great lady. We are indeed a special assemblage of Montgomery County Public School Educational Foundation. We have come together as a community, brought together to pay tribute to Patricia Baier O'Neill. She was indeed an enthusiastic public servant whose greatest aspiration and love was to simply serve the children of Montgomery County. That dedication garnered the respect and admiration of colleagues and friends who acknowledged her work by electing her to leadership roles, seeking her perspective on educational policy issues, and by giving her special awards and recognition for her many, many, many accomplishments. Pat's service to the Board of Education was history-making, and Pat's legacy will be further underscored by a 5-year, $10 million gift to MCP Educational Foundation. Let me just repeat that, a $10 million gift, $10 million, $10 million, and that will be in honor of Ruth and Norman Rales and Patricia O'Neill. I mean, unbelievable, unbelievable, and very much appreciated. As this celebration unfolds, the president of the Norman Rales and Ruth Rales Foundation, Josh Rales, will be talking about his family's decision to honor his parents and to honor Pat with this $10 million gift. I'm still like blown away by that, and so thankful that it is going to help thousands of students in Montgomery County Public Schools. And again, you'll hear more about that. You'll also hear from our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Monifa McKnight, who will share how this gift aligns with her administration's theme of putting students first. She will come and share that vision with us. And we're going to hear from Yolanda Pruitt, the Executive Director of MCPS Educational Foundation, who will highlight the progress of the foundation and how this historic gift accelerates all of what the foundation will do for our children. Their remarks will be preceded by family, friends, and colleagues of Pat, and we will hear from Pat's husband, who will give us and share with us the family's response, and that is his formal name's James Richard O'Neill, but we know him as Rick. So he'll come up with us a little later. But before we go any further, I will spend a few minutes recognizing the various members of Pat's constituency who are with us this evening. So please raise your hand if you attend or work or have worked in a MCPS school, or if you are a part of the MCPS central staff. Please hold your hands up. Wow. Thank you. Yeah. You can lower your hands now. If you are a member of your school's PTA or a member of the Montgomery County Council of PTAs, please raise your hand. Okay, we have great representation. Thank you. Now, if you are a friend, an admirer, a colleague, or anyone like a friend of Pat, please raise your hand. That's all of us. Thank you so very much for coming. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Our gathering in this beautiful venue devoted to encouraging kids to create and be creative, that which comes to their spirit, we are pleased that Pat would know that this is the place that she envisioned, where children can grow and dream and be. We want to thank Kara Lesser, Executive Director of the Kids Museum. Where are you? Stand up. We want to thank you. Kara, thank you so very much. You and your staff have been incredible. We know that you have a grand opening in a few weeks, and you were kind enough to lend us this place. We think it's in great shape, but I know that you were really worried about that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. You found the time to support us. Everything in this place, and I hope that you were able to walk around, resonates with Pat's dedication to improving the outcomes for children. Everything. We are delighted to be celebrating her life in this beautiful, cheery place with all of you. Please enjoy and engaged in the program. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Scott Shaftus. I've had the honor and privilege of completing Pat's term on the Board of Education, which I'm currently doing, and I really want to acknowledge Rick. Thank you so much you reached out to me right away and have really been a great support, so thank you very much for that. So as most of you know, Pat served as Vice Chair of the Montgomery County Public Schools Educational Foundation, an ex officio role assigned to her by her fellow members of the Board of Education. And given that, I just want to acknowledge the officers and directors of the foundation. Chairman Melvin Lashinsky, Vice Chair Brenda Wolf, Treasurer Paul Lelick, Secretary Kim Watson, Dr. McKnight as the Interim Superintendent of Schools, Monifa McKnight, Executive Director Yolanda Johnson-Pruitt, and then the directors, Penny Abramson, Joshua Boki, Stephen Cohen, Susie Leong, Jennifer Nordheimer, Linda Plummer, Arlandis Rush, Farzana Sabi, Victoria Samuels, Rob Smith, Rebecca Smondrasky, and Matthew Swibel. Pat also enjoyed the collaboration of her colleagues on the Board of Education, and several past and present members of the board are with us this evening. I will first introduce those who are currently serving on the board and who are here tonight. President Brenda Wolf, Vice President Carla Silvestri, Judy Daka, Lynn Harris, Rebecca Smondrasky, and Shebra Evans. In addition, we're delighted that several former members of the board who served with Pat are here tonight, and I'd like to just call out their names and acknowledge them. Alan Chung, Phil Kaufman, Shirley Brandman, Chris Barkley, and Jill Ortman-Faust. And last but certainly not least, we have several public officials with us tonight. I will read their names. From Annapolis, Delegate Mark Corman and Senator Nancy King. On County Council, Gabe Albernaz and Andrew Friedson. From the U.S. Congress, Representative Jamie Raskin. Mark Elrich had to be called away this evening, unfortunately, to read a eulogy for someone who passed away, but Rich Madalino is here with us tonight, and former County Executive Isaiah Leggett. Thank you all. We really appreciate having you all here. Have a great time this evening.
Good evening. My name is Brenda Wolf, and I'm glad to be here with you this evening. I noticed Catherine said that we had something to drink. I kind of missed that. Anyway, I am so honored to be here today to talk about Mrs. Patricia O'Neill, Pat, our friend, my friend, and fellow Board of Education member. Pat served on the board for more than 20 years, and we miss her wisdom, her passion, and her commitment every day. Once I became a board member, I started most of my mornings with a phone conversation with Pat. Sometimes it was breaking board business, but more often than not, we shared the joys and fears of parenting adult children, the unbridled joy of grandchildren, and our hopes for the future. Pat's deep love of the school system was widely known. She often talked with pride of having graduated from Walter Johnson High School. She was true blue MCPS. She had years of institutional knowledge and such a deep commitment to MCPS and all of our Eli Elrich's and families. Ms. O'Neill, Pat, spent many years guiding the work of the Board of Education's Policy Management Committee. She played major roles in developing policies that transformed system work, from curriculum to grading and reporting to family life to community engagement. She was a major force in helping the board codify its values into actionable policies. She helped shape the system, and her influence will be felt for decades to come. So today, we celebrate her and we thank her for her dedication, for her service, and for the passion and advocacy she brought to her work. You will hear a great deal about Pat's life tonight. She was a very big deal here in Montgomery County, and that didn't happen by chance. Pat worked hard at everything she did. So please sit back and join us on this celebration of a life of service, accomplishment, and joy. Thank you.
Honored dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Carolyn Baier O'Connor. Thank you for this opportunity to remember my sister, Pat O'Neill. I'm so proud of my sister and all she did. This tribute is well-deserved, and it is my honor to participate. My sister was born Patricia Ann Baier on August 20th, 1950, at Garfield Hospital in Washington, D.C. My mother, Ethel Cap Baier, grew up in Los Angeles, and my father, William H. Baier, grew up in New Brunswick, New Jersey. They met during World War II, and after the war, they moved to D.C. Our dad worked at the Navy Yard in the Judge Advocate General's Office of the Navy. When the Navy decentralized operations in the late 1950s, he was transferred to the Bay Area, and we moved to San Mateo, California, where we lived from 58 to 65 when Dad was transferred back to D.C. Pat attended Janney Elementary School in Washington, D.C. through 3rd grade, and then schools in San Mateo through 9th. When we moved back east to Bethesda, she started 10th grade at Walter Johnson. My sister never held back her opinions. I'm sure those who know her can attest to that. And she managed to get herself in the newspaper quite regularly, especially over the last 24 years. When we lived in San Mateo, she had a blonde cocker spaniel named Honey. There was some sort of dog show in the area, and although Honey was a beautiful dog, she was not a show dog. My sister wrote an earnest essay about how special and important her dog was, and the piece was published in the San Francisco Chronicle. That was probably her first mention in the paper. There have been so many since then, especially the beautiful editorial in the Washington Post after her sudden passing in September. At WJ, Pat was involved in the drama department. She performed in plays as well as working behind the scenes. She also served on a committee of BCC, Walter Johnson, and Walt Whitman students who brought entertainers to the Whitman Dome, including James Brown. Pat was also active in student government. I know these experiences were formative to her preparation for a career in public service. Pat met the love of her life just as she was getting ready to graduate. The Walter Johnson class of 1968 had more than 700 students. My brother-in-law, Rick O'Neill, a WJ classmate, did not know Pat in high school, but learned that the two of them were both planning to attend Southern Methodist University in Dallas. He called her up to suggest they drive together to graduation at Cole Fieldhouse at the University of Maryland. When they met, Rick was 18, Pat was 17. I was 10. Anyway, with her diploma in hand, she headed to Dallas. Thank you.
Afternoon. Pat and Rick remained together at SMU, and that's how we all knew them. Pat and Rick, or Rick and Pat. And Pat and I met when during sorority rush in early 1969, our freshman year, we became pledge sisters in Kappa Delta sorority. Pat was a leader. She served as the treasurer of the sorority and took that role very seriously, always timely and accurate in all of her responsibilities. Of course, she was smart, but not just in academics, but also in current events. Because she was from the Washington area, Pat's back home local news was the national news, and in those days the news was big. Civil rights, Vietnam, Watergate. You know, the good old days. Pat's interest in children and youth was evident in her time at SMU. She volunteered with programs for the disadvantaged and vulnerable children. It was Pat who told me about a brand new program for children on public television. That was November of 1969, and that program, Sesame Street. So it is no surprise that Pat's future included children, youth, and public service. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tom Murphy, and it's really a privilege to be here tonight to celebrate my friend Pat. When Rick finished law school at SMU, Pat and Rick moved back to the Washington area here. Rick joined a law firm, and Pat joined Woodward and Lothrop for a while, for a period of time before she accepted a teaching position at preschool. Jenny and Melissa came along, and as they grew up and moved through the school system, Pat became deeply involved in PTA and emerged as a passionate and inspiring PTA leader. When Pat and I reconnected at a PTA conference in 1997, she was Whitman's cluster coordinator, and she told me she was planning to run for the school board. I immediately signed up to join a crew of truly amazing early supporters, led by Carol Jarvis, her campaign manager, working on the first campaign, and I was privileged to work on every campaign thereafter. Pat's path to the school board was not unusual in having its origins in local school advocacy. Shebra,
Right. It's so great to be here and to see everybody out in the audience. And as you stated, Pat got her start in PTA, much like myself. I'm very fortunate to work alongside the parents and teachers and staff in our community. And I spoke to many of our community leaders, elected officials that are sitting right here in this audience, talking about our shared values in education. And when I think about my discussion with Pat, it's a little bit different. I was able to have access to Pat at board meetings, coming to operating budget meetings. And so Pat was really instrumental in me making a decision to run on the board. When we had a discussion about family, it was really important that as I did this work, that I considered my family in all that I did. And so Pat having served on the board with young children, Sydney is now 19, Sierra is 15. And at that time, when I was considering running for office, Sierra was 7 and Sydney was 11. And so what Pat did to help reassure me that I could do this work and still be committed to my family was that having a husband at home who was very supportive was really important. And that's why I always think about Rick. And Rick and Lawrence have become really good friends, sitting together at various get-togethers, but just knowing that I would need the support of my husband to do this work, because we would have some long nights on the board. And so I really appreciated her being candid with me, sharing the good and the bad, right? The bad being that there will be some long nights. You'll miss some school choruses, like the games, you'll miss some instrumental music concerts, but there's a balance and I'll help you. So just appreciative for her being so supportive in that way.
Rebecca, prior to your election to the board, you also were very active in PTA, and you served also with Pat as a board member of the foundation. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what drew you into public service, the way Pat came into public service?
Sure. Well, a lot of what my colleague Ms. Evans has said rings true for me as well. We were very involved in the PTA, both at the local level and then at the county level. I got very involved with state politics and advocacy for MCPS, and really had the opportunity to get to know Pat through our work on the board of the Education Foundation. I think it's so amazing to see so many people here, because every single person in this room has been affected and touched by Pat in some way or another. And for me, the thing that stands out the most I will confess that there have already been at least 2 times when I have called Pat's phone. We've been in the middle of doing something at work, and I've called Pat's phone just to say, I wish you were here. I would love to talk to you about this and get your guidance. And for me, the thing with Pat was that I could always pick up the phone and call her and get her guidance. She was wise beyond anyone that I know. She had a memory that's just incredible, and her historical knowledge of MCPS just is beyond belief. She was someone you could ask anything to, and she would have an answer for you, and if she didn't, she would get it for you. And one of the things that I feel like really stood out with her and kind of encouraged me in the work that I do or try to do on the board is her communication style. The fact that she really appreciated that everybody had a different way of communicating that they preferred. She would work very hard to make sure she reached out in those ways to all of us, and she was always there to share her perspective on things. So for me, whether it was in the PTA or on the serving on the board of the Ed Foundation or on the Board of Education, Pat was someone that I knew I could always go to talk about whatever the issue was. And we didn't always agree, but she was always open, honest, and very straightforward. She had a way of communicating, I would say, but whether it was at the board table or in private conversations, so that you not only really understood the issues, you understood her position on the issues, and you would remember it. She would put things in ways that people could really fully understand, and I respect that so much. So for me, that was a lot of the ways that she influenced my decision in terms of what kind of work I want to do on the board, and what kind of board member I wanted to be. And I will hold that with me forever. And I try to emulate her every day that I work in the policy committee, because everyone here knows that she did great work on the policy committee. And they're very, very large shoes to fill, and I'll never get it quite right. But I think about her every time I have a meeting, and what would Pat be thinking? What would Pat say about this? What would she do? Even when we do our pre-planning with staff. So she'll just forever have an impact on me, like she has on so many others, and all of the children in Montgomery County. So we're very appreciative of her.
So it sounds like once you joined the board, she had a pretty significant influence on you and your approach to public service. And was that also the case with you, Shebra?
Absolutely. How many of you in the audience are business owners? Raise your hand. Right. So Pat, when I think about Pat, I think about a couple of things. Pat had the mindset of someone who owned their own business. She was very thoughtful. She knew that her thoughts would dictate her beliefs, her actions, and relationships. You heard Rebecca, my colleague, speak about relationships. Just everybody in this room speaks to who Pat was. You knew that you could pick up the phone or text Pat, and she would hold whatever it was that you called her about in confidence. The one thing that also resonates with me about Pat is, who remembers the show Cheers? Everybody knows Pat's name, and they're always glad that she came, right? Because when she came with insight. She gave you context. She was our historian, right? And so when I think about Pat and having the opportunity to lead with Pat, she was just, so she would call you, right? And Pat never tried to persuade you or push you into doing something that you did not want to do. But what I loved about Pat, because she was so into relationships, the first thing she did was ask about my family. We would just have a regular old conversation about our kids, and then she would move into the work, just sharing her insights, her thoughts, giving you context about what we've done in the past. My takeaway from Pat is, you know, you don't know where you're going unless you know where you've been, right? And so Pat was very good at reminding people of our history, of where we've been, how we should learn and analyze that history, and how we could move forward with what we've learned, right? So it was really good to lead with her. She had an office, I don't know if many of you knew that, is IHOP on Rockville Pike. So when we were officers together, that's where we met very regularly, just to sit and talk and share ideas and just talk about what was to come. So she was very thoughtful in thinking forward, right? She was not only in this moment, but she was thinking 10 steps ahead. Pat could tell you here, and we're in April. Pat could tell you what might come up in fall. So Pat was really great to work with. I definitely will miss her, and it's just so good to see Rick and her 2 daughters here today, and her sister as well. And thank you to the Rails Foundation. I mean, that right there speaks to who Pat was, right? What you all are doing for our students here in Montgomery County is just wonderful, and I'm so glad that we were having this tribute to celebrate a great person who did some good work. And I'll just say this, you know, you never know how much you will think about somebody once they're no longer here. And I tell you, I think about Pat more than I did when she was here, now that she's no longer here. And so I often find myself thinking, well, what would Pat do? How would she think about this? How would she approach this, particularly when it's things that we need to be steadfast in? So I just wanted to share that. We'll miss my colleague a great deal.
These are great stories and very familiar stories about a person I've known well for years, and it's just terrific to hear those remarks. Pat may now be gone from our site, but her legacy is very much alive and vibrant. And she remains with us in spirit through the policies that she shaped as a board member and through those with whom she worked and shared a passion for excellence in education. Let's listen to a few.
What I admired most about Pat O'Neill was everything. Her tenacity, her drive, her leadership, and I think perhaps most of all, how genuine she was. She would tell you exactly what she was thinking, and she would tell it to you with true conviction.
I've worked with hundreds of board members and spent thousands of hours with board meetings. I've never seen anybody quite as comprehensive as Pat O'Neill. She loved not only children and all children, but she loved all the parents. She had no special issues. She loved all of the issues. And she was a great historian and had a good mind.
She understood both the minutiae of the work, but also could personalize it because she could relate to the needs of families and students.
And she was always a reminder that, regardless of budget and size and diversity, we still had a responsibility to all of the children and their families and the community.
Everywhere you look at it, she's been an incredibly important person in the history of Montgomery County Public Schools.
Shebra and Rebecca said about Pat. I really can't. As working on the board, it was so well done, and it wasn't scripted, and we just totally miss her, and I know that. We think about her. When we do things, we say, well, what would Pat say about that? And I remember Pat saying, well, we're preparing these children for jobs in the future that we don't know what they are or what they're about. And I really can't add to any of that. Pat was really dedicated to the policy committee, and as Rebecca said, she formed a lot of the information about the policies that we have in the school system, and she was really dedicated to the Education Foundation, which I'm sure most of you know about, but it's a wonderful thing for students that have leadership ability but need a little bit of help to make sure that they accomplish what they need. I worked with Pat, or beside Pat, for 15 and a half years, and it has just been a joy. I don't know when she had time to talk to everybody in the morning. I know I talked with her too. And we ordered our clothes from the same place, but you all heard that story before. And I'm wearing green because, you know, remember her parties for St. Patrick's Day? So, and Brenda wore her green too, she remembered. And her influence was beyond the board room in Montgomery County. She was president of Maryland Boards of Education, which is an old organization, 64, very venerable organization. She also was president of the Washington Area Boards of Education. Not an easy task, because we have to meet with all of the school systems around here, and she was just admirable at that. I also want to say that Pat was not vainglorious. She was very modest, and yet she had so much ability and so much that she knew about and was important and was willing to impart with other people. Pat was president of the board 5 times and vice president 6 times. I know that may not mean much to those of you who do not have to be a vice president and a president, because they have to do an enormous amount of work outside of what the regular board members do. So I have to congratulate her family for letting her do all of that. It's just so exciting that she got all of these awards, as you see, and you're going to hear more about, but she also got the Distinguished Service Award from the school system, from the board members. We felt so strongly about her. And usually people who work in the system on boards do not get this award, but we felt that she was so special, she really deserved to have it. So let's see how her experience her expertise helped to shape the state and the national education in this country. Thank you.
Hi, Nancy.
Hello.
We are so honored and deeply moved to be here in tribute. Nancy, we've heard a lot about these morning phone calls. I happen to know that you and Pat had one of these morning phone call connections for many years. In fact, want to make sure that everyone knows your elected service started on the Board of Education with Pat before you began an incredibly distinguished career in Annapolis. I wonder if you'll reflect back and share some memories of those early morning phone calls.
Well, the early morning phone calls, and I was kind of laughing to Pat's daughters here tonight, because in our younger days when we did get up early in the morning, sometimes those calls would be 7 o'clock or 7:15, and I could hear Jenny and Melissa saying, "Oh my God, for 7 o'clock in the morning," because we would talk rather loud because we were so passionate about issues that we were talking about. But we talked about families, we talked about issues, and you know, after I got off the Board of Education, one of the things that we kind of laughed about was education is a language. For those of you inside the system, you've got the language, the education ease, that people outside the system don't necessarily follow, because it changes with each new idea that comes along for education and each new initiative. So Pat would keep me informed on all of those issues, and I could ask her any kind of questions about what was going on. What does this mean? What does that mean? And she could explain it to me, and then I could in turn do my job in Annapolis, because I actually understood what was going on. I remember one time, it was about September of 2021, when Pat called me one morning and she said, you know, because of COVID and everything that's happened, we're going to have to do something to fix maintenance of effort. And so we talked about it a little bit. I talked to my people in Annapolis, and we just knew that we had to hold all these different school systems across the state harmless. But that idea, that initiative came from Pat. Because she was thinking far ahead, and she was talking to the people in the system, and that's how that piece of legislation actually ended up happening. We had the same conversation early September because she felt that we were still going to need a fix, and that's helped get it through for this year. So we just had a lot of good times talking about education, talking about Montgomery County politics, which you could talk about all day, or some of us could, because it's always so entertaining. But that's really what we did. We shared a lot. I could tell her anything and know it wouldn't go anywhere else. She could do the same with me. Not that she ever told me anything she wasn't allowed to tell me, but we did share a lot. And I miss that. I mean, I miss it every day. There are just things that happen every day that I think, oh, I got to talk to Pat. But yeah, those memories will be something that I'll never forget.
I will say for me, we shared several car rides. We would always drive together to the annual conference at MABE, and that was a time to talk big picture issues, a time to think about our schools, and then catch up a little bit on the gossip that was going on. So we had our moments there too. Well, you've already shared some examples of how she was thinking ahead very strategically, which lots of folks have said about her. But I'm wondering if I could ask you to reflect even a little bit more on what the impact was for you. You are now working in Annapolis as a state leader. She's still seeing those insights on the ground from Montgomery County, largest school district, incredibly diverse, striving for equity. Did those insights continue to influence you in your work?
Definitely. I chair the Education Committee on the Budget and Taxation Committee, and there are always different issues, and each school system across the state is just so different. But Montgomery County has always been the leader in every initiative there is. We're always there as one of the leaders. So if I could talk to Pat and know where Montgomery County was going, but also then know where other counties should be moving up to, should be getting to. So it was very helpful having her and she was not shy to tell me how she felt about things. So.
We all remember that. Well, so earlier we had the opportunity to ask Senator Chris Van Hollen why he found Pat's perspective as a long-serving local school board member to be valuable, even as he considered national educational policies. And if you'll watch the video, here is his response.
You know, throughout my time in elected office, from my years in the state legislature to my current service in the United States Senate, I've always relied on strong partnerships with key local leaders to help guide my decisions and actions. And that's because folks who are working on the front lines of our communities have a very good day-to-day sense of what's happening and what's needed. And when it comes to our schools and our students, Patricia O'Neill, our beloved friend Pat, was one of those key people on the front lines. Pat had her finger on the pulse of what was happening in our schools. She was a good friend and also a trusted counselor, someone I could count on to share her expertise and provide unvarnished input and advice. I greatly valued Pat's guidance because I always knew she put the interests of our students first. And the voters of Montgomery County clearly felt the same way by making her the longest serving member of the school board, and she earned that same trust and support from her colleagues on the board time and time again. And that's because we all knew that Pat combined a good heart with a smart mind to address the diverse needs of all of our students. She wanted to make sure that our students not only had the academic tools and instruction they need, but that they also have the social and emotional support needed to thrive both inside and outside the classroom. And she recognized the important connection between the two. Her knowledge has been especially important over the years given the diversity and size of the Montgomery County public school system, the largest in Maryland. So I relied on Pat to have her ear to the ground, and she always did. She was as wise as she was passionate, and I'm forever grateful for her willingness to share her wisdom. That wisdom helped guide my work in Congress and continues to do so, to promote initiatives that reflect Pat's belief that our schools need to invest fully in the well-being and success of every child. Today, I'm working with colleagues in Congress to pass legislation that would finally fully fund Title I and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, so our schools can hire more staff and bolster support for every student. I'm also fighting to pass legislation that would strengthen our nation's network of community schools, which help support students and their families in a holistic way, including through counseling and mental health programs. These efforts will support Pat's vision of ensuring that the doors of opportunity are open more widely for all of our students. Pat left us far too soon, and her loss leaves a big hole in our community. But each of us must now do what we can, not only to remember her good work, which we should, but as we are doing here, carry her wisdom forward and fight for the causes she loved. We must rededicate ourselves to the principles of service, integrity, compassion, and excellence that guided her life's work. And I know that if we do that, her legacy will continue to inspire generations of Marylanders to come and help our students achieve their dreams. Thank you, Pat. We love you.
Thank you, Nancy, and we want to thank Chris for sharing those remarks that just really drive home the point that Pat was a statesperson who influenced education at so many different levels. She never stopped caring about all children. She never stopped learning and growing, and it is in her honor and memory that we should all continue to do the same. Thank you.
And I have to add, for Pat, I have to add this, because I know she'd be smiling about this. She made it longer than Blair Ewing.
Hear, hear.
On March 9th, 2022, the Board of Directors of the Montgomery County Public Schools Educational Foundation unanimously approved a resolution to award its Lifetime Achievement Award to Patricia O'Neill. The award is given to alumni of Montgomery County Public Schools for their sustained service to a cause, their contribution to innovation, and their humanitarian service. It is a great honor for me to be part of the celebration and to honor an extraordinary public servant.
The board's resolution is in your program book. The award reads, Lifetime Achievement, Patricia Baier O'Neill, Walter Johnson High School, 1968, Montgomery County Board of Education, 1998 to 2021, for sustained dedication to equitable public education in Montgomery County, Maryland. She advocated for policies to ensure no child's circumstances would become a predictor of their potential to achieve. Patricia was actively, oh, that's the end of mine, sorry.
was actively engaged in the Foundation's Grants Committee. She provided valuable insight into the needs of MCPS programs and schools. Following the announcement of her death, many gifts were contributed in her memory. These gifts and a leadership contribution from her family established the Patricia Baier O'Neill Endowment for Grants to Schools. A more complete description of the fund can be found in your program. The first award will be given in the upcoming 2022-23 grant cycle. The programs supported by this fund will be a wonderful extension of Patricia's work. Her knowledge and insight will truly be missed.
Patricia O'Neill was a very engaged part of the MCPS Educational Foundation and its work. The foundation is in its 34th year of operations. We have provided 34 years of scholarships for students and grants to educators to enhance instruction. Over the past decade, in response to changing enrollment, we have added fundraising campaigns for school supplies, instruments, and the settlement of school lunch debt. To strengthen the sustainability of the foundation, we increased the number of endowment funds from 4 to 18. Endowment funds now represent slightly more than half of our total assets. Patricia O'Neill actively participated in this progress, encouraging us to tell the foundation's story to more and more people and to explain the changing needs of MCPS students. And although she is no longer with us, her enthusiastic spirit will live on through special initiatives carried out in each of our foundation core areas. You've just heard about the endowment that will support grants to schools, which is one of our original core missions of the foundation. And thanks to the generosity of the Norman R. Rales and Ruth Rales Foundation, Pat will also be honored through the establishment of a special scholarship program that will launch in 2023. The Ruth and Norman Rales Patricia Baier O'Neill Scholarship, recognizing academic excellence, will benefit 1,000 MCPS high-achieving students over the next 5 years. It's really a very important milestone for the Education Foundation. We have wanted to really increase our reach in terms of helping students further their education beyond the achievement of a high school diploma. And so this will greatly accelerate those efforts, and we're just delighted that we were selected to receive such an honor, and we're keenly aware that it's Patricia's connection and involvement and belief in our work that has brought about this opportunity. The gift, I want you to know, is the result of conversations in which Dr. Monifa McKnight and Mr. Joshua Rales defined a program that will award annually $10,000 to 200 students from families earning below Montgomery County's median household income. It's the latest in a series of contributions given in support of MCPS by the Rales Foundation. Members of the Rails family have long roots in the county. All of the trustees of the foundation graduated from MCPS schools. And Josh Rails is going to join Dr. McKnight and myself here on stage so we can talk more about this wonderful program and what lies ahead. Please join me. Thank you both for joining me. This really is wonderful. You've heard everyone cheering about it, Josh. You know we're excited. So I want to begin this conversation by having you talk about your family's tradition of improving the lives of others through philanthropy and your ties to Montgomery County Public Schools and Montgomery County and anything else you care to share.
Terrific. Well, I want to first of all, on behalf of the foundation, thank the Kid Museum for hosting this lovely tribute event tonight. And it is a great honor to be partnering alongside the MCPS Foundation, working closely with Dr. McKnight, and in particular the O'Neill family, with whom we have a very, very strong bond and shared values. But going into the involvement in philanthropy, it really started with how my parents grew up. My dad grew up in a Hebrew orphan asylum in New York City during the Depression and spent the bulk of his childhood there after his mother died in childbirth. And it was a rough and tumble time. And his father was around, but he couldn't support his family. And so my dad ended up growing up there. And my mom grew up in a working class family in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Neither had the opportunity to attend college, but they were able somehow, through hard work, determination, perseverance, kindness to many other people, to lift themselves up and build a beautiful life for themselves and their family. And they believed deeply in giving back. And that was the inspiration for the creation of the Norman R. and Ruth Rails Foundation. And when they passed, having had many conversations with my dad, who survived my mom, we said, look, we don't need this money. We've been fortunate ourselves. Give it to your foundation, and we'll build a legacy in your memory, and in your we'll keep your values alive. How many children have that opportunity in life, have that blessing? And so that's how we got here. And like Pat, my parents love children, and they believe deeply in the power of education as a pathway to opportunity. And so that has been our focus since my brothers and I, co-trustees, took over the foundation in 2013.
Wonderful. That's such a great story, and it's so inspiring. It says that your parents were very similar to the pipeline of students that this program aspires to encourage for post-secondary education. So I think that's really wonderful too. Did that come into play as you started conversations with Dr. McKnight to define the program and what you wanted to accomplish?
Well, this relationship with Pat was hatched many moons ago. I met her first, I believe it was somewhere around 2004 when Jerry Wiest came to me and my family, and he wanted to bring a tutoring program from North Carolina that was very successful with second graders. And he said to me, with Pat in the meeting, it was Pat and Jerry and me. And so they were putting a little bit of a squeeze on me, but at the same time, it was for very good purpose. And they were saying, you know, when you're in second grade, you're learning to read, but after second grade, you're reading to learn. And if you don't get that to click at the right time, you'll have a difficult time catching up. So we launched that program, and we called it the Ruth Rails Reading Program, and it went on for several years. But it wasn't until really several years later that when my brothers and I took over the foundation, we began a series of public-private partnerships with MCPS. And as you mentioned, Yolanda, we have deep roots here, and we're grateful for the opportunity to have grown up in this community and benefited from so many of its attributes. And so we did a program with Montgomery County where we helped 6,000 elementary school students go through a summer program where they had academic and enrichment programming. So they were learning, they were closing gaps, they were having fun, and they were doing good purpose. And Pat was really enormously helpful. We got a 9-0 vote on the county council to support this partnership. And she helped us, maneuver a little bit and gave us advice, and it was invaluable. And as several have mentioned earlier, I mean, she was very authentic, very genuine. You heard the student on the video, and she inspired trust, and she did have that owner mentality that Shebra mentioned earlier. It's so true that it was like her school system, and she wanted it to be the best, and she wanted everybody to learn. And so we did that, and then we moved on to college tracks, with which I'm sure the vast majority of you are familiar, where they're empowering students from low-income backgrounds, generally first generation, to go to college, to raise their sights. And they had Nancy Leopold, who was an outstanding leader and founder. She created 2 schools at first, BCC and Wheaton, and we helped them to create a proof point where they're now in 5 schools. They went on to Watkins Mill, they went on to Quince Orchard, and to Paint Branch. So that impact has helped thousands of young men and women, and will help thousands more in the future. And again, it was because of Pat. Pat wasn't afraid to try new things. She wasn't afraid to engage in partnerships from the private sector, and she really solidified our relationships with the county council. We really owe a debt of gratitude to Craig Rice and Nancy Navarro, who were instrumental in these programs. And then finally, something that we're working with Dr. McKnight on now that I'm really excited about, and it never could have happened without Jack Smith initially and Pat, but Dr. McKnight really doubling down, and Pat has been a champion of this, was bringing in a tremendous organization called the Lavinia Group to work first in one elementary school, East Silver Spring, and now we're in 10 different elementary schools to work on closing the gap in literacy. And it's all about bringing best practices. And Montgomery County, from what we experienced as kids going through the school system and what I've seen as an adult, has an unbelievable infrastructure and competent group of leaders, teachers, dedicated professionals. You have Yolanda running the foundation. And so we were willing to take a shot when we were asked to bring the Lavinia Group in to share best practices. And it shows an enormous amount of confidence for a school system of 165,000 students, as was mentioned, the biggest in the state, to introduce new ideas. Just like the New England Journal introduces best practices and great doctors learn from best practices. That's how things get better. And so we've gone from 1 to 10 elementary schools. This year so far, we've improved the number of students that are on grade level by 15 points. In kindergarten, the proficiency has doubled from about 1/3 to 2/3. We've had some really groundbreaking results, and we've been involved very closely with Dr. McKnight and her team, and it couldn't have happened without her. And Pat, God bless her, just a few short weeks before she passed away, we celebrated her birthday for lunch, and we shared a hot fudge sundae with a candle. And we said, COVID be damned, we're going to share this. And we talked about this program, and she would be so excited to see what has happened. So those are the kinds of things that we've done, and we wouldn't have done them without Pat and the relationship that was built over the years, and her values are so aligned with my parents. So it's a great honor.
Thank you. And I'm going to get you to say more, but the dynamic individual sitting to my left has to have an opportunity to let people know a little more about her. I want to take this moment to acknowledge that Dr. Monifa McKnight is just 2 short months away from making history herself. She will become the youngest and the first woman to head Montgomery County Public Schools. She is a woman of action. I am in the opposite end of the building, and I can still see that. Dr. McKnight has been on the move constantly. There was the initial challenge of bringing children back into the classroom during a pandemic, which only happens once in a century, so you don't get a lot of playbook plans to tell you how to do that. You call a lot of audibles, which is what she has been doing. And then in the midst of those challenges, you lose a strong collaborator on the board and have that loss followed by another variant, which wreaks quite a lot of havoc on your workforce, with a lot of them testing positive, having to isolate, having to get classrooms covered, etc. But despite all of that, when in Thanksgiving this proposal was received, Dr. McKnight took up the conversation. And I want you to just share with us for a moment what this proposal meant to you, because of what Pat meant to you as someone who collaborated with you and supported you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Yolanda. And good evening, everyone. So good to be here with you tonight celebrating our beloved Pat. I've had 2 decades in the school system. And I'll start with Pat because that's why we're here. I knew Pat's name before I knew her. When I came here as a 3rd-year teacher into the system, knew her name, and then had the pleasure to work alongside her and got a chance to experience the kind, generous board member who was unwavering in her support to the success of the school system. That's who she was. And so I saw that and quickly admired it. And so when I had an opportunity to work alongside her as the deputy superintendent, then the interim superintendent, I just appreciated her leadership and look forward to continuing to learn. Now what's interesting is I'm wondering, Rick, when did Pat sleep? Because I heard all the conversations earlier about the morning conversations. I was on the night crew. That's when I would have my conversations with Pat, you know, and oftentimes on the weekend. And what she initially taught me was you have to know the individual well in order to be able to serve them well. And so she got to know me. I got to know her family. I remember it was a couple of Super Bowls ago when the cable went out, and Pat and I were talking about MCPS business, and she said, Monifa, I don't know what I'm going to do because the cable's out, today's Super Bowl day, and Rick is not happy. And, you know, so we got, you know, had those types of conversations to know what was happening. And Melissa and Jenny and the grandchildren, it's like, it was so nice to be able to meet you because I heard so many stories about you. It just all seemed very connected. But what she modeled was how we have to think about all the children and all the families we serve in Montgomery County Public Schools. She modeled that as a board member. So how she would engage in conversations to let me know about her family and how she knew about mine. And it came back to the center of how do we take the knowledge and experience that we have to serve others was the core of who she was. And I appreciate that. I remember when we were experiencing COVID-19 in the beginning of it, I think Ms. Evans mentioned this earlier, she taught us you have to understand the history before you determine what needs to be done in the future. And she read that book about the Spanish flu, and she came back and shared everything she knew about what she learned from that book and how we need to take into consideration of planning for COVID-19. Now, what Pat didn't know was she was teaching effortlessly at the time, because when we would talk, Pat would always say, Monifa, did you see something that happened on the news at CNN or local news? And I recognized Pat knows what's going on. I also realized that that's how she was able to predict what was going to come our way before it happened. I learned that from her. So then I started to be the one to say, hey, did you see what happened on Meet the Press or CNN, you know, because it taught me that what's happening in the world, the school system and schools are a microcosm of that. And so we always have to keep an eye on it. And so I appreciate those lessons that she taught us. And I think that comes into play into the very reason we're here and having a conversation about Pat and the celebration of life and celebrating this scholarship opportunity. Because for her, it was always, what do we do to make sure that our students and families in Montgomery County thrive and continue to be the best? And how do we serve them in a way in which our community benefits from the education that we provide in the school system? And through that model of her leadership and her tenacity, when Josh and I had the conversation about this scholarship and what it meant, it was about equity and making sure that we wanted to make sure we were leveling the playing field for children in Montgomery County Public Schools whose story may represent the story of Josh's family and parents and others who we hear from all the time. And so I appreciate her inspiration and keeping us true to, when we have opportunities such as this type of opportunity, making sure that it's making an impact in our community in the most meaningful way.
Thank you. I want to spend just a couple more minutes on the scholarship program, starting with you, Josh. What is your hope will happen for MCPS through this scholarship program?
Well, first of all, it's so great to have such a young, dynamic leader now running the school system, and we're continuing the aspiration of America. And that aspiration is being fulfilled, and it's the same thing with this Excellence Award. We focused on the students that were of low to moderate income, that were really high achievers, that it was clear that they made a sacrifice, they worked hard, they were determined, and they were committed to excellence. And that's everything that my parents stood for. That's the way we were raised. And we know, Rick, that's everything that Pat stood for and that your whole family stands for. So our hope was to let these young men and women know that their achievement did not go unrecognized. Secondly, we all know how expensive college is these days and how detrimental it can be to be burdened with student debt. And we thought that this award could help to defray the cost of college. We thought that it could come in handy if they needed to have some money available to pursue a really great career internship or to do a semester abroad where they, might need a few bucks, or even to the extent of needing to buy a computer or a coat or having the money to pay for a flight home from college, which isn't always the case, to visit their family over the holidays. So that was very important. And then last, we hoped that with this Achievement Award, that these young men and women would continue the virtuous cycle that, you know, has been part of the American story of people that have had success, sharing that success and paying it forward, helping others. And that if these young men and women become leaders, which I believe they will, that they will think about giving back and showing their gratitude by helping others in the future. And that way we can keep my parents' values alive, keep Pat's values alive, and their spirit, and that it'll live in all of us in the years ahead.
Wonderful. Dr. McKnight, you are putting students first. So how does this fit into your plans, this scholarship program?
Absolutely. Putting students first has to be the core of every single thing that we do in a school system that is embedded in why we are here, to serve children and to serve their families. This scholarship is going to allow 200 students to walk across a graduation stage and know that their community supported them in pursuing their goals beyond high school graduation. That instills confidence. And instills confidence not only in the student, but in the community, because it says to the student, my community cares about me and wants to equip me to be successful in every way I possibly can be as, hopefully, a returning community member in Montgomery County. And so I am thrilled that our students will see us come to their rescue in so many different ways. For those who may have concerns about getting their education but not gaining debt because of it, or for those who are concerned about whether I can even try to do this because I'm not sure how I can get access. Well, through this partnership, the school system and the Rails Foundation has been able to figure out a way to do that. And so I look forward to them taking advantage of this opportunity and for it to pave the pathway for young women and men to go out and pursue their dreams and be successful and become leaders in the careers that we need them in today, and the careers that will be established even more as a result of COVID-19 as we figure out new ways to do things in this world. And we're going to need every single one of them to do that. And so I'm thrilled that the scholarship is going to be the step in the right direction to prepare our young people for that.
I'm thrilled that it's going to happen in your administration.
Thank you.
Me too.
Okay, sit tight. At this point in our program, we want to give Rick O'Neill the opportunity to address us in response.
Just an overwhelming tribute to our dear Pat. We are just completely humbled, our family just honored at such a wonderful tribute, and the awards just amazing. The Educational Foundation, many friends. You know, Pat would just be so thrilled at all of the friends and colleagues that have come here. And it's truly just amazing. The special lifetime award that Mel Lashinsky mentioned approved, just so honored. And the foundation's board, the grants committee, agreeing to an endowment for Pat and the foundation's projects. And what the foundation tries to do, I think I know this from listening to Pat for a while, they try to fill in the holes where the school's budgets just can't cover all the projects. And the schools just really appreciate this. And Yolanda, you all deserve so much credit. And I have to say, I want to say a few words of thanks to a few people. There's so many we'd like to mention by name, but we have to say, first of all, to the Rails Foundation, just a fantastic, fantastic program. Pat, Pat would be so honored to be mentioned with Josh's parents, the Rails parents, in the program. It's just the scholarship program is just truly amazing. Really very, very appreciative. And Pat really was about all of the children. I think you all know that. It was, yes, she served in District 3, which is the down county area, but she never viewed her role as just the down county children. She was absolutely committed to children all over the county. Felt they were all in deserving of the same quality education. I want to give a special thanks also to our beloved Yolanda. Yolanda just does so much work for the Educational Foundation. Just, Yolanda, it's really just astonishing. And she was so pleased to serve on the Foundation's board. And Pat intended to remain on the board as long as the board would have her. Hopefully a while. Just very, very untimely. But one other thing I should also say. We have to say thanks to Dr. Monifa McKnight, superintendent of our schools, and our Board of Education, led by President Brenda Wolf. I would just say, I can mention each by name, but you all know their names. But she regarded Pat and our entire family regarded each and every board member and everyone on the staff, and the teachers, as a friend, a colleague. Pat just viewed everyone on the board as such a close colleague. And I have to say, the board is really a representative of true public service. It's not like you're going to get rich serving on the school board, and it's not like you're going to be loved by everybody. It's truly amazing. It really is the height of public service. I want to say also that all of our past superintendents, our past board members, many of whom are here, and the staff. Oh my goodness, Pat loved the staff at the board, just thought the world of them, said she couldn't operate without the staff, and I think that's absolutely true. I should also mention, just in terms of just how much MCPS was involved in everything. Pat and I Pat loved to cruise. We were on a cruise. It always happened when only certain times of the year, because the board had many meetings throughout the year. In any event, we were on a Baltic cruise coming out of all places, St. Petersburg, Russia. And we're walking through the dining hall, and there, sitting at a table, was former Superintendent Harry Pitt. And of course, Pat had to sit down at the table. We had dinner with them, and of course, discussed the schools. And you just could not quite get away from the schools. And it was fine with me. I mean, I got used to it after a while, in any event. But I want to thank everybody. Before I say one final thing, I wanted to thank everybody that participated. All of the Walter Johnson band that was here, all of our crew. Pat dearly loved all of the TV crew, just the complete staff, just absolutely amazing. In any event, I want to absolutely thank all of you so much. And just, I have to say a personal note about what has really helped us get through this tough time, my daughters, Jenny and Melissa, as well as Pat's sister Carolyn, and my sister Joanne, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. Joanne's a teacher in Denver and was previously occupied. Just wonderful in helping us, myself and our family, get through this tough period. Really very much appreciated. In any event, I would, just as a final note, it really was nearly 54 years I've known Pat. It all started at Walter Johnson, graduated, I hesitate to say, in 1968. And I did, by the way, play in the Walter Johnson band. I mentioned this to the band. They would not let me play one of their saxophones, which is too bad. But in any event, it started with the Montgomery County Public Schools. It really ended just for the moment with Pat streaming the county council, dealing with COVID in the schools in September at the beginning of schools there. And the school board wondering why Pat wasn't on the Zoom call that was to follow the county council meeting. But this tribute, so wonderful, friends, just a complete remembrance of Pat. And I think, though, the one thing to take away from this is Pat really was a passionate servant, public servant. I must say, I also have to say thanks to the Washington Post, and I know many people have an issue with the Washington Post, but the editorial they ran, and they ran it mentioning Pat as a passionate public servant. And it's really true. I think that's exactly what her legacy is, as well as, and Pat will you just remember this about Pat, family, friends, and education. And it's education for all students. She was just passionate about education for all students. I can't thank all of you enough for coming, and all of you for honoring Pat. And Josh, just a terrific program from the Rails Foundation. This is going to really be something just spectacular. Thank you all very much. Really appreciate it.
There is just a few more moments as we bring this gathering to a close. I mentioned earlier we would show your remembrances of Pat, text messages to our virtual number. As they are displayed on screen, we will hear music supplied by the Bethesda Chevy Chase High School Chamber Singers, and that will be followed by video clips of Pat as she was featured in various publications. Thank you. That concludes our program. Thank you for being with us.